So we will now switch gears here, and we have a full panel of economists. What is that? So, where is Georgina? Uh, I just met a young lady who told me that just finished a dissertation where she was studying the impact of media on tolerance. So I'm going to suggest that she studies the impact of media on tolerance on economists, apparently. No, seriously, so we have a great set of speakers here, and we will start with Gabriel Botino from Argentina.
Good morning. I'm the only non-economist in this group, so I thank you. My friends arranged this presentation. They want me to start, so they will get rid of me faster, and they will start talking about important things after me. So, good morning again. My name is Gabriel Botino. I'm from Argentina. I work for the United Nations Development Program. I'm in charge of the climate change portfolio. I'm also a guest researcher at the University of Buenos Aires and at the Latin American Faculty of Social Sciences. The focus of my work is on the relationship between climate change and agriculture, and narrowing down more the focus of this specific project and how I use the support of the Nexus program. I work trying to provide those tools necessary to improve the performance of some type of farm equipment toward climate change mitigation. So I have done some previous work 2 or 3 years ago, trying to understand the factors fostering innovation of agriculture time production of farm equipment, and which are the dynamics that affect their innovative performance. Why? Well, several researchers and specialists, most from the field of industrial organization, is analyzing this sector for 2 main reasons in Argentina. One is their incredible innovative capacity. The farm equipment sector has the ability to modify equipment as fast as the demands calls for it. So we found in previous research that there is a very close relationship between farmers and producers. So when a machine has to be modified, this change occurs almost immediately, and this is a distinctive feature compared to other industrial sectors in Argentina. The second thing is the economic and social relevance of this specific sector. It employs more workers than the automotive sector, that is already a very relevant sector in Argentina. So, well, this is why the farm equipment industry, and which is the link with climate change. Argentina has a very well-developed agricultural sector, as you may know, and that incorporated technology since the early 80s until now in a very fast manner. During the 90s, we had like a second agricultural revolution, mainly fueled by 3 pillars. One was genetic engineering, that is the introduction of GMOs, basically just to have a number on our heads. In 1996, there were 600 hectares of soybean planted in the entire territory, and nowadays we have more than 17 million hectares of GMO soybeans. The other pillar is the improvement of production practices. That's it to say, for example, direct seeding or crop rotation. A lot of combined practices that improve the efficiency of the entire system. And the third pillar is the use of modern agricultural machinery, mainly produced at the national level. So what I was speaking a minute ago. Which are the main features of this specific sector nowadays? For instance, better use of available resources through the use of GPS, georeferencing, yield mapping, automatic pilots, that improves the competitiveness, the sustainability, and the profitability of all the agricultural productions at every scale. So these technologies can be applied at small scales as well as big scales. Small scales in Argentina is like between 100 hectares and 500 hectares, and you have like a medium scale between 500 hectares and 1,000, and then you have a combination of big scale and like large corporations working and combining integrated vertically from the production to the processing of the byproducts, of the agricultural byproducts. Which is the distinctive feature of this technology? The high degree of adoption with a clear perception of the immediate benefits, both from the suppliers and the consumers of these new technologies. That is to say that farmers know that incorporating these technologies are earning more money. The rate of adoption of these new technologies can be compared to the United States and some European countries. It's even the rate of adoption is even higher than in Brazil, that the agricultural sector is huge. So I don't want to go into that figures, but trust me that this is a distinctive feature of this sector in Argentina. And again, which is the relation with climate change? More than 40% of total emissions in agriculture are originated in agriculture. In agriculture, and in agriculture, and within that percentage, it's not agriculture. It's 20% is cattle raising, and the other percentage is mainly originated in emissions from the agricultural sector. So the next step is, the main question of my research is how to implement low carbon practices in agriculture, optimizing fuel consumption, improving the use and application of seed and fertilizers, and modifying agricultural practices. That's it. In that context, which is the role of the farm equipment industry? So, the role is try to be more efficient in a way where there is not a clear perception of the immediate benefits for farmers or for the farm equipment producers. Which are the incentives here? Because we need to be sustainable and we need to produce a public global good. Let's say it's to reduce the level of emissions of greenhouse gases. So the challenge is to continue highly innovative for manufacturers, and to be aware that they won't be able to rest on their technological trajectory. So they are facing new knowledges, and they are facing the challenge we are talking we talked yesterday, we talked this morning, and we continue talking, that is, they need knowledge from other disciplines, electronics, robotics, use of new materials. So for farmers, again, as I said before, the challenge is how to incorporate these new technologies that do not provide an immediate incentive for them. What I did in this project. I work, and that was a real pressure, and I think what the most important part of my research was the interaction with the stakeholders. I work with researchers from the National Institute of Agricultural Technology, researchers from the national government, farm machinery producers, farmers, and farm equipment operators, as well with my colleagues from both universities. So I had the opportunity to travel many times to more than 30 farm machinery industries, to visit farms, to talk to operators. This is Julio, one of the operators of a harvester machine that was trying to fix some problems the day I visit them. And we figure out in which sectors we should work. And we choose two sectors. In fact, it was one sector at the beginning, that was the sugarcane sector, and we split into two areas because it was much more easier to work, because the stakeholders were clearly differentiated. Why are important these two sectors, and what I did with this in this specific area? Researchers from the National Institute of Agricultural Technology find out that the sugarcane sector at the farm level was very, very inefficient compared to neighbor countries. For instance, we went to the field to run an energetic balance analysis, that is to say, to analyze how units of energy you need to produce another amount of energy. And we found that in Argentina, in the sugarcane sector, you need one unit of energy to produce 3 to 5 units of energy. And in Brazil, you need 1 unit of energy to produce 5 to 8 units of energy. So this was huge. Here we had a problem, and we tried to figure out where was the problem. Thanks to God that the problem was at the farm level, because if it was at the at the industrial level, I had to figure out how to get out of this project. But the problem was at the farm level. So what were our findings? That because of several different practices, cultural practices, the use of several types of machines that were not very modern, and some agricultural beliefs that were not true, farmers were using a huge amount of fuel and fertilizers that was not used by the plants. Just as a raw example, you have like 1.6 meters between rows to plant sugarcane. They were putting fertilizers with a specific machine in the middle of these two rows, assuming that the roots of the plant will reach the fertilizer, that is 80 centimeters, and the agricultural scientists from the National Institute of Agricultural Technology discovered that the roots only reach up to 40 centimeters. So they never reach the fertilizer. So what we did here was, and I will talk about this a bit later, was to construct a methodology trying to solve this problem. The other sector was the fertilizer sector, and specifically the nitrogen fertilizers, the nitrogen fertilizer sector. In Argentina, we have 2.5 companies, one really big, that produce nitrogen fertilizer. And when I talk to the farmers and to the farm equipment producers, I asked why they were using machines that spreads the nitrogen on the surface and do not incorporate the nitrogen in the soil, having a lot of efficiency problems and releasing a lot of the gases to the environment. And they say, well, because of the inputs that we are using, let's say the byproduct of the fertilizer industry. So I found that the problem was not at the farm equipment level, but to the nitrogen producer that was developing some kind of product that was not helping farmers or farm equipment producers to incorporate this type of fertilizer into the land. So, okay, we decided to work in two projects and to try to find some resources to work in these two areas. Starting with the last of the sectors, we have drafted a project that has the government endorsement to analyze the entire chain of the fertilizer industry, and acknowledging that there is the innovative capacity of firms is closely related to collaborative form of productions, search networks, and their capacity of identifying actors that are solving similar problems. Let's say we are trying to put all these people together and try to figure out how the entire chain is working for the, fertilizer production, doing a technological needs assessment, and try to build up some recommendations to be incorporated into the national strategy of climate change. We got some resources, and this project, we were able to mobilize up to $1 million to do this specific project and this specific analysis that will take like 3 years of research and implementation. The other project is to work in the sugarcane sector in the northwest region of Argentina, in the northwest region of Argentina, mainly in Tucumán, trying to develop a regional strategy for climate change mitigation, working at the sugarcane sector and trying to build up from that some experiences that could be generalized to the other crops. Which is the main lesson learned here is that given that the incentive doesn't come from the economic side, let's say, we need a new institutional architecture and improved organizational designs that promotes best practices and conservative practices in the agricultural field. We have drafted another project here. This project doesn't have the resources yet. It's a $5 million project that has the government endorsement. So we hopefully get the resources to do also this project with the National Institute of Agricultural Technology, working with three provinces for this period that I was just talking to you before. So thank you, and I hope that you can understand this not easy project.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. So we're moving to the second presentation by Marcelo Cafera from Uruguay. You will notice that we have 4 tango economists and 1 salsa economist. And that's how the program was organized, actually. So, Marcelo.
Good morning, and I would like to start by thanking Fulbright and Walter for his encouraging speeches all over this year, and my fellow people from the Fulbright Scholarship. I learned. You maybe don't believe me, but I learned a lot this year from you. And I'm saying something that is really true. I mean, I didn't hear that. When I was in high school, I couldn't decide whether to be a biologist or an economist, and I finally decided to go to the School of Economics of the University of the Republic in Uruguay, and the reason why I couldn't decide is because I didn't see a future in being a biologist in Uruguay, and I wanted to change the world, which is what I think economics is about. And but someone near the end of my undergrad journey, I discovered environmental economics, and decided to do my undergrad thesis on the desiccations of wetlands to plant rice in Uruguay. And soon after that, I was lucky enough to get a Fulbright scholarship to come here to the US to do a master's and then a PhD in environmental economics. I learned a lot of things during my PhD study here, but one basic thing that I learned is a basic lesson of environmental economics, which is the following. If you are a regulator and you want to control emissions from a set of firms or sources, you should better use economic instruments, that is emission taxes or tradable pollution permits, instead of emission standards or any other instrument. And that is basically because, one, incentives matter. Pollution is too much because abatement is costly. And economic instruments put a price on pollution. Second, economic instruments reach that cap of emissions the regulator wants to reach cost effectively. That is minimizing the sum of the abatement costs of the regulated firms. But soon, a big question appeared in my head and was the following: why is not Uruguay using economic instruments to protect the environment if these are so great? Actually, there's a long list of countries that are not using economic instruments, not only Uruguay, but there's a long list of answers also to this question in the literature. But it became clear to me when I went to Uruguay to do my dissertation research that the answer in Uruguay was as unsurprisingly as sad, and it was ignorance. It's clear that, at least to me, that in order to implement economic instruments, regulators and legislators need to understand how they work and what they can accomplish with them. So I soon realized that my work in my country should be divided between the academic research at the University of Montevideo, where I work, and what I like to call environmental economics capacity building. And that is exactly what my Nexus project is about. My Nexus project has two sets of activities, or had laboratory experiments to test firms' compliance behavior with environmental regulation, and the capacity building set of activities in the public sector, which are basically, or were basically, courses and seminars that I gave at the DINAMA, which is the National Environmental Office, and the Congress. I'll talk about more of this later. And I'm advising the DINAMA, the Environmental Office, on policy design. Let me talk first about the economic experiments. What is my motivation for the experiments? It's simple, as I have just said. Economic instruments minimize the aggregate abatement cost of regulated firms. But what happens when you add enforcement costs to the equation? I mean, in particular, do tradable pollution permits minimize the sum of the abatement cost of the firms plus enforcement costs of the regulators? And there is an answer in the literature to these questions provided by myself and a colleague, which is also my colleague with the experiments at the University of Concepcion, Carlos Chavez. And the answer is yes, tradable permits minimize the sum of abatement and enforcement costs when they are perfectly enforced and the penalty is linear and tied to the pollution permit price. So, but I'm sorry, these results are theoretical. They lie on assumptions about the firm's behavior under different conditions, combinations of emission standards or number of permits applied by the regulator, the probability that a firm is inspected, and the speed of growth of the penalty with respect to the level of the violation. So we run the experiments to test for these assumptions, basically. These experiments are also funded by the ANI, which is the National Environment Research Agency in Uruguay. And to run this experiment, we recruited, actually not more, something less than 200, undergrad students from the universities in the city of Montevideo, which basically are the University of Montevideo, where I work, the University of the Republic, the Catholic University, and ORT. And the experiments are a classical methodology in economics. Basically, they try to mimic real economic decisions in a laboratory or outside the laboratory. And the economic subjects, which in this case were undergrad students, earned real money for their decisions in the laboratory. The experiments were conducted at the University of Montevideo, that computer lab. And in the experiments, the students faced either emission standards or tradable pollution permits as the regulatory instruments. Then they have to decide how much to pollute. And they were inspected with a given known probability at the end of that period. And if found it in violation, they were fined with real money. And this was repeated 10 times. And at the end of the 10th period, a second experiment where I changed the parameters followed. So my treatment variables were basically the instruments, emission standards or tradable pollution permits, and the combination of the probability of inspection and the level of the emission standard or the number of tradable permits applied, and the speed of growth of the penalty for violations, as I said before. I designed these experiments at UMass Amherst during my visit funded by the Nexus program in the summer of 2011. I thank very much Professor John Strand and John Sprague for the very helpful comments and discussion during that summer. And I can tell you two things about the preliminary results of my experiments. First is that I'm not done. But I can tell you that theory predicts well the experimental behavior of subjects or firms in the case of emission standards. That is basically the regulator can pull all these leverages like the inspection probability defined and the level of the emission standard to produce a given level of emissions for the firms, from the firms. And there is more noise in the tradable pollution permits markets in the lab. But that is not too much noise. I mean, I have more work to do, but we are not that far from theory. There's just some noises, for example, price variability and things like that. But we're finishing the experiment this next week, so more detailed analysis of the data is needed. And we expect to publish these results in late this year. What about my second set of activities, the environmental economics capacity building? Well, I haven't said that, but my Nexus project stakeholders are Jorge Rux, the director of the environmental office in Uruguay, the DINAMA, and Jorge Pozzi, some of you know, a representative, a member of the House in Uruguay. In this part of the project, my objective was to increase legislators and regulators' understanding of what economic instruments can accomplish. And let me tell you what I did first with DINAMA and then with Congress. And these are the DINAMA headquarters in Montevideo. As part of the Nexus project, an agreement was signed between the DINAMA and the University of Montevideo. Here I am with the director and one of their staff members, his staff members. And the first activity as part of this agreement was a course that I gave on the economics of environmental policy to key staff members of the DINAMA. This course was between February and April. It's just finished 2 weeks ago. A second component of this agreement is an economic analysis of the DINAMA's enforcement strategy, which its aim is to make recommendations on enforcement design to minimize cost, enforcement costs to make everybody comply with effluent standards. And I'm doing this by estimating the relative effectiveness of different instruments, enforcement instruments like self-report, inspections, and fine. How? The methodology is twofold. I'm doing a statistical analysis on the past enforcement action and past emission level. This has already started on a really low path. And the other one is a field experiment. That is a real pilot enforcement strategy with real firm outside the laboratory, outside the office, outside. Well, what about my activities with the National Congress? Not much. It has been more difficult. I have in my record an unsuccessful attempt to do a seminar in December in Uruguay, which is like impossible, but I tried. So it is in my record. The good news is that I contacted more legislators, so I have a new seminar on the construction for June 2012. In particular, I am working with Jorge, my stakeholder, but also with the president of the Environment Commission of the House of Representatives. So, summarizing, as part of my Nexus project, what did I do? I visited UMass Amherst and designed my experiments. I conducted these experiments in Montevideo, expected to publish the results by the end of 2012. I gave a course to DINAMA staff, started to work on the economic analysis of the enforcement of the policy at DINAMA, and I'm going to give a couple of future seminars in the Congress and hopefully some more another place. So, during my Nexus project, I have the opportunity. This woman was very important to me during all my graduate study. I rented a room at her house during several parts of my grad student life, and I was lucky enough to get this grant and spend with her her last summer. And I don't know if you know her. She is the mother of the Gaia theory and the endosymbiosis theory. So I decided to not be a biologist and ended up living with one of the most famous biologists in the world. But she passed away soon after I left her house. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. So next presenter is Lucio Castro from Argentina.
Hello, good morning. My project is about transport and logistic costs and how this is related to export diversification. First, I want to thank to Fulbright Commission for having the opportunity of being here and working in this project all over this year and the last year. Why transport costs and why diversification? Well, the basic idea is that transportation costs affect diversification in the sense that affect innovation in new products that are exported. The important thing to keep in mind is that developing countries' innovation are different from developed countries. Export innovation in developing countries usually is just adaptation of products from other countries that are exported for the first time in a developing country. What do we know about this? Well, we know that the innovation is transmitted from the pioneer, the firm that for the first time exports a new product, to the followers, to other firms in the economy in two different ways. There are two different hypotheses about this. One is the importance of transportation costs, distance, geographical distance. As you increase distance, decrease the knowledge spillovers. And the second hypothesis about similarity. The more similar you are to the innovator, more probable is you are going to start exporting this new product. Why is this important? Well, because we know the empirical evidence shows that diversification, innovation is related with economic growth. And economic growth at the end is related with development. So let me talk to you about my project in particular. Let me see how this works. Okay. I have a problem with the software. Give me just 1 second. It's happened the same last time. Otra vez trago esto. Just give me just 1 second. We have the same problem in Querétaro. ¿Dónde está? Aquí. Okay, well, sorry for that. So let me talk to you about first my project. My project tries to investigate this link between transportation and logistic costs applied to a particular case, and this particular case is a province in Argentina. This province is Córdoba. Córdoba is a province located in the center of Argentina. It's a landlocked economy. And just to give you a flavor how important is Córdoba, it's an economy which is as big as Mongolia in terms of the geography, as large as Bolivia, and with an income per capita similar to Brazil. For Argentina, it's a very, very important economy. It's the second largest in terms of population, the third exporter in Argentina, and also is the third largest in terms of the economic size of the province. My stakeholder for this project was ProCórdoba. ProCórdoba is the export promotion agency. Why ProCórdoba? Well, ProCórdoba is one of the best export promotion agencies in Argentina. According to a project I did a couple of years ago, it's one of the top 4 export promotion agencies in the country.